My name is Ashley Battle, and I am the MSP Product Marketing Manager here at Nerdio. And I am here with Frank Albani. Tell the people a little bit about yourself, Frank.
Hey, Ashley. Yeah, it's good to be back with you. Always look forward to these. I can't believe we're on episode 4 already. So that's kind of flown by since we started these. And I feel like keep seeing the momentum build and people be excited about the different features that we can bring to light. Just a little bit about myself, super quick. I work here on the MSP team here at Nerdio. Been here since February of 2023. Before that, I was actually a customer of Nerdio, so been using the tool for a long, long time. And now my daily role is really focusing on customer success for our existing partners who work with us here at Nerdio. So nurturing those relationships, helping them to do more with the tool, which is one of the reasons why I love this webinar, because it gives us a great forum with which to do that. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. And I know that we have done this opening a few times before, but we are getting new people on the webinar every single time. So, I mean, we got to let them know who we are and what we do and how to reach Frank and his team and get the full Nerdio benefits. So
Yeah.
let's get started.
100%.
Let's talk a little bit about the features that we will be covering today. Let's do that. So, key features. What are these features and why should you care about them? So, once again, I'm gonna go through what the features are, give you, my product marketing spiel, and then Frank is going to do what you guys have all come here for, which is demo the features and talk a little bit more in depth about them. So the first feature I am going to cover today is image management. So what is image management? So within Nerdio Manager for MSP, there are actually 2 main types of images. So you have your global and you have your desktop. And the benefit of using image management is that as an MSP, you are now able to easily manage those images because you are able to manage the creation, the maintenance, and the deployment of those standardized VM images. And this also includes, operating systems, applications, and configurations. And being able to handle all of that within this image management feature brings you guys a few benefits. So the first one, I'm going to cover standardization. By using standardized images, you can ensure a consistent environment across a multitude of virtual desktops and deployments. And, that uniformity actually reduces the risk of compatibility issues, and it can in turn help simplify troubleshooting and support if something, God forbid, were to go wrong, right? The next thing is efficiency. So with image management, deploying new virtual desktops can now be done rapidly and reliably because a lot of the times these images are pre-configured and ready to be deployed at scale. So you are able to now respond to your customers' needs really quickly. You're able to respond to their needs for additional resources or a new desktop environment. And the final benefit I'm going to touch on is customization and control. With image management, you can now customize global and desktop, those 2 image types that I was talking about. You can customize global and desktop to meet specific client needs. And this ensures that every deployment has the necessary applications and settings that are tailored to that specific individual's business requirements. So think of, the business requirements for finance versus education. Those are going to be different, but when you use image management and that standardization, you can scale up and easily and efficiently manage those no matter what industry your customer is in. Frank, did you have anything that you want to add to this? Did I cover it well?
Yeah, you covered it great. I think for our purposes of our demo, probably not going to cover global images too much today. I would say if you've got an interest in global images and you want to talk through some of that with us here at Nerdio, we'd be happy to chat with you, pull in your customer success manager or your contact here at Nerdio, and we'll dedicate a session just to talking about that. But primarily today, we'll talk about the desktop images within a customer's tenant and environment. But yeah, great overview. Appreciate that, Ashley.
Awesome, awesome. And we are going to change the flow up a little bit, guys. Surprise. We decided to surprise you, give you guys a little bit of a treat. So Frank is actually going to go ahead and show off image management now. So go ahead,
Awesome.
Frank.
Yeah, I'll dig right into it. Let me get my screen shared out here. And we got some polls integrated in as well. So actually, we'll want to maybe skip ahead to those as soon as I'm done with my screen share. But let me know if you can see my screen. Okay.
Can see
Yes.
it. Thank you, Frank.
All right, awesome. And guys, I really, I wish I had put more time into preparing for this demo today. But as my teachers used to always tell me, I procrastinate too much, right? And my response always to them was, "You just wait. I'll make sure that I don't procrastinate any longer." Actually, I did that one for you. So
But
here we go, guys.
I love it. Love it.
Didn't expect that one coming. All right, guys, so here's what we're going to do. We are in Nerdio Manager for MSP. We're in our sales demo environment that we have here at Nerdio. And I'm just going to hop into an account here, right? So you see accounts upper left-hand side. We'll go ahead and click into this customer tenant here, or demo customer WinHeart. And then we'll go to desktop images. Now, before we kind of dig in, I think it's important that I explain like the purpose of a desktop image, and many of you folks who are here in the attendance already know this, so bear with me for just 1 second. But if you're not using desktop images in Nerdio, I highly encourage you to start doing that and to consider why it's important. Think about it this way. Your desktop image, in many ways, is going to be your source of truth as to what your host pools actually will look like at the end of the day, right? So what your session host that users actually will sign into for AVD, that source of truth ought to be, in most cases, I'll say, ought to be the ability, ought to come from that desktop image, I should say. And so the desktop image is almost like your prep zone in a way, right? Your desktop image, you're going to install your software, you're going to do your Windows updates on. It's almost going to be that pre-production environment in many ways. And then your session hosts within your host pool are what your users are going to actually sign into when it comes to an Azure Virtual Desktop environment. So I think it's important to set the table by saying that it doesn't mean that you can't deploy AVD without a desktop image. You can, you have the ability to do that. But in most cases, I'm going to say, you're going to want to do it with a desktop image. And that's where Nerdio comes in and makes that process a lot simpler for you as the MSP, as the IT provider. All that being said, the next thing I want to touch on is you have the ability to kind of manage this desktop image lifecycle in 3 phases. I like to think of it as. Phase 1 is actually turning on your desktop image, installing your software, creating all your customizations that your end users need, right? Their apps, they're getting that Windows OS prepped and ready to go. That's your again, pre-production phase, and you're going to go and update your image in phase 1, okay? But phase 2 is when you actually need to sysprep that image. And sysprep really just basically means making sure that image is able to be used or deployed into a host pool. So it's almost like that preparation that needs to be done in phase 2. And there's a whole like process behind it, right? There's some warnings about what to do and what not to do. I would say a couple of those that we see very often and get asked about pretty frequently is, our sysprep breaks. What's causing that sysprep to fail? Well, in many cases, it's because something agent-based is still installed on your image. Think like endpoint protection, EDR software, antivirus endpoint, even RMM agent or tool, anything agent-based still being on your image when you go and actually run the sysprep process is going to go ahead and break that sysprep. It's going to cause it to be unsuccessful. And that's going to happen inside Nerdio or outside of Nerdio, right? That is a constant across the board. And so anytime you have a sysprep fail, go and inspect that desktop image and make sure there's nothing agent-based still on there. I would say that's step 1 every single time that we're going to probably ask you if you end up putting in a ticket, and it's for good reason. It's because it's one of the most common things that we see go wrong. So that's phase 2, right? Nerdio calls it, and I'll just kind of click this button here on the side over here, It's really called set as image here in Nerdio. That's what we call it. But in many ways, it's just a sysprep, something that many of us are used to on a physical desktop workstation. When you're imaging machines, same process kind of in many ways here in AVD, right? So that's phase 2. And then phase 3 is when you're actually going to go and you're going to re-image your session host in the pool, and you're going to make sure that your session host that users are signing into are going to use that updated image that's now been sysprepped and set as image here in Nerdio. So 3 phases: updating image, maintaining that image. Phase 2, sysprepping it, making it able to be deployed into a pool. And phase 3 is actually going and re-imaging your host pool with that updated source image. So hopefully that's super clear. Just wanted to
Frank, I have
kind
a
of,
question.
yeah,
How,
go for it.
yeah,
Okay.
Frank, I just have a quick question. How often would you recommend they update that image? Is there, like a standard that they should follow? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, it's a good question. Really good question, actually. I would say it's entirely up to the partner and really in conjunction with that end customer. And the reason I say that is because, some workloads are going to require more constant updates. I think, during tax season, I think about how certain applications, those line of business apps, need to be updated weekly, right? Or even sometimes daily. Well, in that case, you're probably going to be doing your reimaging and your desktop image management a lot more frequently. Whereas, maybe during off-peak seasons, maybe you're doing it weekly or monthly. Think about, in a lot of ways, how you want to make sure that you are keeping that image up to date with Windows updates. So consider, Windows patches coming out. Maybe align your schedule to that and make sure that you're updating your image right after those Windows patches come out as well. So a ton of different considerations to kind of factor in. But I would say Nerdio gives you the flexibility to do it daily, weekly, monthly, really to kind of to fit that need that you have. And I'm going to kind of show you that in just a second, how that would all look. All right, really good question. So why don't I do this? Let me scroll down to our image. We've got a few here, and I'm going to walk you through what phase 1 looks like, okay? So phase 1 would be by simply coming to desktop images on the left-hand side in your customer environment, clicking power on, and now you have a couple of options here in Nerdio. So what you're basically saying is, turn this image on for me. Maybe you want to manually do some updates, right? You're gonna, as soon as this powers on, you'll have an option where the power on button is today, or in this moment, I should say. And it's gonna have, as soon as that image turns on, it'll say generate RDP, meaning that you can actually, within Nerdio, create an RDP access, a one-time access from your public IP for a certain period of time, maybe 30 minutes that you want it for. And you'll be able to straight RDP with a .rdp file directly into that image in Azure, if you so choose to do it that way, right? That's one way. The other way is maybe you don't want to actually get on the image at all yourself. You want to just have it turn on, and then you want to leverage the automation in Nerdio, like a scripted actions or an applications management, to go ahead and update and patch that machine. So for instance, just by clicking the power on button, I can then have this ability to run several Windows scripts against this machine. So for instance, maybe I can run our update Windows 10 script, or install Office. Where was it? Install Office, just saw it again. Update. Install Microsoft 365 Office apps. So we have some built-in scripts that you can leverage. Now, of course, you can customize them, clone them, make changes. That's all good. But you have the ability to go ahead and take our scripts in our repo and use them to go ahead and update this image for yourself, instead of getting on there manually and having to do all that. The other thing you can do is you can leverage our applications management capability. That's called Unified App Management. And essentially what we've done is we're using something known as Winget, which is native to Windows 10 and Windows 11 operating systems now. And we're allowing you to update third-party applications as well. So not just Windows 10, not just your Microsoft apps, not just doing things even just via Chocolatey in the past, which we've had the ability to do, but now we can literally get right into the OS itself and take these third-party applications and put them on the latest version just by kind of following steps like this. And so you can basically come to this list, find those applications that you want to have updated and installed. And again, instead of having to manually get on there yourself, you can have Nerdio go and just do all this for you while this machine is turned on. saving you a bunch of time. The other thing you can do is you can choose this schedule power off button. So for instance, I don't want to leave this image running 24/7. I also don't want to babysit it and have to come back and turn it off or forget to turn it off, which would cause a increase in cost for your Azure consumption in that month if you forgot to turn off your image here. And so what I like to do is I like to say, give me like a 4-hour maintenance window, and then I'll have Nerdio go and power off this machine. It should be enough time to go and get what I need done. So these are some of the automations you can build into this phase one approach of keeping this image maintained and up to date, right? And these are just a handful of things you can do. There's way more things you can implement as far as custom scripts, bringing in more applications than just what you see here. All of those things you have the autonomy to do, but I just, as an example, wanted to show you what that looks like. The last piece of phase one is to go and create a schedule behind all this. So you can flip this to on, meaning that now, instead of having to manually come in here and power this on and let it run, you can say, back to your point before, Ashley, maybe I want to do this weekly, and I want to do this, every Friday at 12 a.m. Now, again, you don't even necessarily need to do this on a weeknight or overnight or on a weekend, right? All you're doing is powering on your, kind of consider it as like your offline copy, and you're just turning this machine on, and it's not affecting production in any way here in phase one. So you can turn this on at any point, let it run your patches, your updates, and go ahead and hit OK. And Nerdio will go and we'll keep that schedule in place. And now every week, Friday at 12 a.m., we'll turn that image on, run those steps that we configured, and we'll take care of phase one for you. All right. Next thing is phase two. Seeing some great questions, by the way. Really appreciate the involvement from the audience here. We'll try to get to those at the end, okay, as much as we can. Then we have phase two, set as image. That is your sysprep process. So if I hit the set as image button here, there's going to be some options that you can choose from, right? So for instance, you can do your scripted actions here if you so choose, or your applications management as well, before you go and have Nerdio power it off and set as image. To be honest, a lot of folks actually will kind of consider skipping that entire first process here of the power on, and maybe we'll just have these scripts in app management run here right before they sysprep, right? So it's almost like a shortcut in a way. You can do it either or, depending on your use case. I would say, for instance, if your RMM is doing Windows updates for you and you want it to do those Windows updates, well, let me actually just demonstrate how one way you would want to consider doing that, because I think there's a question about RMM. And I'll kind of answer the other piece of that question a bit later on. But if I hit power on and I set it on a schedule, all good, right? What I could do here is I could run the scripted actions and actually install RMM. Let's say it's Kaseya, ConnectWise, whatever it is. I'm going to run that script and I'm going to install RMM. And then I'm going to have this on for a set period of hours. So I'm going to let RMM install. Then, based on your RMM patching schedule, it will go and target those Windows updates or anything else you're doing with your RMM on an automated basis. And great, we've done that. It's powered on. It's good to go. However, what you want to make sure is before you sysprep, you're going to want to remove that RMM. So here in phase two, I'm going to go set as image. I'm going to go run scripted actions. And then I'm going to find my uninstall script, right? So I'm going to uninstall Kaseya. I'm going to uninstall Huntress, whatever it may be. This is when you want to put in those uninstall toggles or scripts to make sure that they don't stay on that image, even if you're putting them on in phase one. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody. Couple other things to call out. You have the ability to run these things, scripted actions, on your source VM or on the clone. So Nerdio has the ability to keep a clone of your master image as we sysprep it. So meaning that it's easy to kind of roll back when you're cloning this image, easy to roll back to your previous source or your master image. The other thing you can do is you can choose to set up some error handling. So for instance, if the sysprep fails, well, maybe it's just a temporary issue in Azure. I don't want my sysprep to not happen that week because of a temporary issue in Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a retry threshold here. A couple other options, just for sake of time. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to every single one of these buttons here. Keep in mind, there's always an information icon next to everything here that you can get some more details on. If you're unsure exactly what that feature or button will do, you can go and click the I button to the right. To be honest, this is a really great new feature, something worth taking a look at. is our image validation, where basically we can create a bootable screenshot for you to see if the image is healthy and is working, and you can see that directly here in Nerdio. Last piece I'm going to mention here is the schedule. So let's say we're doing our power on and running those scripts at 12 a.m. on Friday. Well, now what I want to do is maybe the following day, every week, I want to, on Saturday, let's say at 12 a.m., I'm going to go and I'm going to run my sysprep, right? And you could do it, sometime on Friday, no problem. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go and I'm going to run this weekly Saturday at 12 a.m. You hit OK, Nerdio is going to go and we'll handle your sysprep for you going forward. Last piece of all this, right? Phase 3, final piece of the puzzle is, well, how does this actually get on our host pools themselves once our image is being properly maintained and updated in an automated fashion with Nerdio? So I would go to AVD and host pools. I'll find my host pool that I want to set this up on. I hit this drop down here to the right of manage hosts. I go to hosts and I go to resize reimage. And now you have the option to do a one-time reimage of your host pool. Again, keep in mind, right? This is the phase that you will impact users when you go and do this, because this is what they're signing into. You have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to take that desktop image, the latest changes, let's say, once I've made those changes, and I want the latest version of that desktop image here, right? That's where you pick that. You can also choose to set some messaging to your end users and give them maybe a 10-minute warning. Hey, we're going to do some maintenance here. Please go ahead and save your work and sign out. And then let's say there's 3 hosts in this host pool. Well, I could do them all at the same time to kind of reduce and shrink that maintenance window. It just means that everyone's going to kind of get knocked out at once, but it's going to shrink that maintenance window because you're doing the reimaging of all hosts at that same time. Okay, that is the resize reimage process. But then you also, now there's a new button here for the scheduling. So I'm going to leave this page and I'm going to create a new schedule, right? So webinar, if this behaves, webinar test schedule. And you would say, okay, let's add this schedule. Choose this desktop image here. Choose to send a message, giving everyone a heads up, choosing to process the host in groups of, right? All that we just covered. And then the last piece is, hey, when is our maintenance window? This is something you're going to want to talk to the customer about and get figured out and say, okay, are you okay Sunday at 12 a.m. every week where we're going to reimage our hosts, right? No one can be signed in. No one can access AVD during this maintenance window, but it shouldn't take longer than, let's say, 30 minutes to an hour, and it's overnight, right? And so that's where you as an admin can basically set this and forget this to an extent and say, all right, cool. Nerdio is going to not only patch my image, it's not only going to sysprep it, but it's also going to go and reimage my host pool for me and make my life a lot easier and make sure that I don't have to do this, let's say, on a weekend myself. Ashley, I think that is everything as far as the demo of this portion I wanted to cover at this point.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, that was a great demo by Frank. And once again, we want this to be slightly different than the other webinars that we've done. I actually have a question. I have a poll to ask you guys. Based on the demo that you just saw, which best describes how you feel? So are you comfortable with the way you're currently doing things and you are using this feature? You can do this on your own. You feel like you can do this on your own, but it's not something that you're currently using. Do you feel like you need help from someone at Nerdio to set this up? Or are you not currently managing images? Let's see. I'll give you guys a little bit longer and then we will get those results. The Jeopardy music should be playing right now. All right, let's see. Okay, wow. So a lot of you guys are currently utilizing this feature and you feel good, you feel comfortable with it. And a good bit of you aren't currently leveraging it, but based on the demo, you feel like this is something you can do. You have a couple of hand raisers that that need some help setting this up. And then we have some people not currently managing their images. So yeah, that was like a really
Awesome.
nice mixed bag there. Yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So, all right, let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. So we have covered image management. What's the next thing we're going to cover? Let's see. Let us see. Backups, right? So, what are backups? Guys, we all know what backups are, right? But backups within Nerdio Manager are special. So, Nerdio Manager for MSP, it allows you to administer backups for all of your critical AVD resources, and that includes session hosts for personal and pooled desktops, desktop images, something that we just talked about, VMs, and Azure file shares. So, why should you guys prioritize backups? You guys should prioritize them because they are, super fundamental in IT strategy and risk management. And the benefit of leveraging this feature, especially here in Nerdio, is data protection, right? That's one thing. These backups can protect against, data loss, and that's data loss resulting from, hardware failures, user error, somebody, I don't know, somebody made a mistake, software corruption, or cyber attacks. And we know that those cyber attacks and issues like that, especially like within the last month or so, those are pretty prevalent. So if you are regularly backing up your session host, you can safeguard your clients' data integrity, their information, their data integrity, which makes you then more attractive as an MSP, right? That's why they hire you guys. Another important thing is business continuity. So the backups are crucial for maintaining, business operations after an unexpected event. So like I said, you have unexpected events like cyber attacks, we're starting to get into hurricane season, storms. So in the case of a disaster, having up-to-date backups, it can enable quick restoration of services, minimize downtime for your clients, and minimize the associated costs that comes from those downtimes. And that's pretty much all I have for this. Frank, did you have anything you wanted to add, or are you ready to just jump into the demo?
Yeah, I'm ready to go if you are. Great overview. Let
Yeah. All right.
Let me share my screen. All right. So Ashley, if you could see my screen again, just give me that thumbs up.
I can. It's all good,
Awesome.
all clear.
All right, cool. So yeah, backups obviously super important. And I think a lot of people maybe don't consider Nerdio as like a good, maybe even think of Nerdio as a good tool to go and get visibility on Azure backups. But I'm here to say like 100%, it's a great place to have yourselves, your NOC team, whoever's keeping an eye on your backups day in and day out, to be able to monitor those Azure environments for their Azure backups. And it really goes for I would say several different resources. You can have just infrastructure as a service VMs up in Azure that you're backing up with Azure Backup. Nerdio can help you to manage and administer those, right? It doesn't have to just be related to AVD, let's say. It can be related to a lot of different resources, and I'm going to cover those now. So what I did was I clicked into a customer environment just like I did before. And now you'll see on the left-hand side, there's this backup menu. And so I'm going to work my way kind of down from top to bottom here if I can. So for instance, at the very top, you're going to see some filter menus there, right? So you see show by status, show by resource, show by validation. And the status is pretty powerful because what I like to do, just show you some things that I think of and some tips maybe for yourselves, is I almost like to uncheck completed and protected to start with. And that's going to narrow down anything in this environment that, hey, is probably worth a look for me as the MSP. Because if this is showing here in gray, it means it's not protected. It's a resource that is not currently in an Azure backup policy, meaning that it's out there all on its own. And if something happens to it, hopefully not, but if it does, it's not able to be restored from a backup because it's not in a policy today. And so that's like, to me, an MSP, right? Alarm bells start going off and I say, all right, well, what's up here? Are these supposed to be backed up, these resources here, or are they not? And so I start finding out about that. The other thing you can do is you would also perhaps maybe be able to see anything showing in red on the left-hand side means that there is no active backup taking place on there. So it means that perhaps it is in a backup policy, but that last backup did not successfully complete, right? So that's also another type of problem that you would want to know about or address. And then another thing I would say is as is the case here, is that red could also indicate, as it's describing, that protection is stopped, right? So the source resource is not found. Well, what I think of in this case, considering being at MSP before, you have to deal with decommissioning of old resources. And most likely this could indicate is that, hey, there's a last restore point of January 3rd. It was completed on this server, but it's not actively backing up any longer. And what likely in this case happened was that machine was decommissioned, but we wanted to take one final backup before this machine went to its final resting place in cyberspace, right? So that was the idea there. And you just want to keep on to that, historical backup just in case you need something down the line. But I like to use that filter menu because it's going to really be able to show you, okay, what needs to be dealt with or addressed today, right? The other thing in the next filter menu will allow you to see, okay, well, maybe there's certain resources I'm not overly concerned with. So for instance, if you're using desktop images to create your session host from, that's important, right? Because you don't want to have to redo that work to build an image all over again. So you probably want to back that up. You probably want to back your servers up, of course. And then you very likely want to back up your Azure file shares, because that is where, if you're using FSLogix and putting user profile data on that Azure file share, that's where that user profile data is going to live. Think desktop, documents folder, all these important, user profile data locations are going to live in your VHDX file on Azure file share. And so you want to back that up in many cases, not every case, but in many cases, you're going to want to back that up too. You don't want to lose your user data if something should happen. But then if all that above is true, well, you probably don't, in most cases, really need to back up your personal or pooled session host, right? So I probably want to filter that out of my view if I'm looking for something that should be backed up but isn't. And now I say, okay, here's my desktop image, my server, my Azure file share that's not being backed up. Let's think about whether or not it ought to be added into a backup policy now. So just kind of helping you to use these filter menus, to the best of your ability. The last piece is going to be show by validation. Now, as I kind of touched on just for a brief moment earlier, Nerdio now has backup validation capabilities as of a few releases ago, a couple of releases, I should say. And so this is going to give you the ability to essentially make sure those backups are good. And so what I would say here is you can filter by whether something is validated or not validated. So I think that's something to consider in your filter menu. So now that we've kind of covered the top, I'm going to start working my way down. Well, if something's not being backed up, you have this enable backup button. You can click on that button there. And then if there's a backup policy that can apply, in this case, for some reason, there isn't for this desktop image. Let me try this server. Give me one more second here. Okay. So I'll talk about why there was nothing showing for that server or desktop image in a second. But I just wanted to demonstrate this here, right, which is enabling backup for an Azure file share. If you've got an active backup policy for Azure file shares, you're going to be able to scroll through and see any of those that you want to apply. And you'd hit OK. And now that Azure file share is going to start backing up. Well, while I'm thinking of it, let me scroll down to the bottom. And you're going to also see there's a link here to go to settings to view recovery vaults and backup policies. So I can click on settings, kind of a shortcut to get me here. And in this side of your screen over on the right-hand side, you're going to see everything kind of pertaining to the back-end settings of your backup recovery vaults, policies, and assignments. This is where you can enable backup restore validation. There is a KB article that can be shared, or if you need it, we can get it to you on how to enable validation for your backups as a new feature. So there's a full KB write-up on how to do that. I'm not going to cover it just today, but just know that you can follow those steps to get that set up. So for instance, let's say I had no policies here. For the first time, I'm adding some backup policies. You would simply click Add Policy, give your policy a name, and then you have an option. Is this for a virtual machine or an Azure file share, right? So you're going to be able to set policies according to the different resource types. And then you have the ability to choose hourly, daily, or weekly backup frequencies, at which time you want to run them, you would pick here. And then the next step is you're going to pick your retention schedule, meaning that how long do I want to keep this data for? So if I'm backing on my server, do I want to keep it for 30 days on a daily schedule? Maybe I want to keep it, if I enable this, for the last 8 weeks, something like that. So I'm going to take one weekly full backup on a Sunday or whichever day I choose. Same thing goes for monthlies, right? Do I want to keep the last 12 months of backups? And you would choose at what point do you want to keep that full backup from? Do you want it on the first Sunday of every month that you're going to keep it? That's where you'd set that here. And the same for yearlies, right? And again, more options to choose from here based on when you want that yearly backup point to be kept. You also will be able to set up your snapshots, your instant restore snapshots. What is the retention schedule of those instant restore snapshots that you want to keep? I believe we accommodate up to, last I knew, it was like 5 was typically what we see. Between 1 and 5 instant restore snapshots can be kept. And then, of course, if you're using the backup validation, you can choose when you want Nerdio to go and use the Azure AI Vision and Boot Diagnostic Insights to go and get you some validation on your last backup there, right? So Nerdio is essentially going to boot up your restore. It's going to run like a mock restore, and it's going to pull a screenshot off of that VM for you to validate that it's successfully backed up and that it is a healthy backup at the end of the day. So this is where you'd manage your policy, or create one, I should say. If you've got existing policies, you can see those here, and you can drill down into those settings, right? So you can say, okay, maybe I need to update or modify these settings, whatever the case may be. You can go and make changes here, okay? So going back to backup, if I had one for a golden image, desktop image type in that region, I can enable backup and choose that policy. But because I do not have one in that region, there's no backup vault there. That's why this isn't showing. But just keep that in mind as you go and set this up. The next thing I wanted to show you is, final point on backups, is the restore capability. So if something is enrolled in a backup here in Nerdio, you have the ability to just simply click restore. I'll start there. And then you're going to pick your recovery point. And now you have the ability to choose, okay, I want to restore from this point, right? Let me actually go to an Azure file share. Okay, choose restore, choose a point. Let's see, should be one here that will show you kind of like the path, right? So check this out. Here's the one I was looking for. If you go to select files and folders now, and there is data in there, you can basically browse the file share path right from here and say, oh, this is the document that went missing. I want to go and I want to restore it back, right? Simple as that from that point in time. Nice and easy, simple functionality to run that restore. And Nerdio will give you the option to, if it exists there already, skip it, or to overwrite it if it's in that location. Gonna hit cancel there. Last couple things worth mentioning here. You can disable backups from here. Now, role-based access control may dictate whether or not you even see that button, or if there's you're using approval workflows, which we've spoken about in a previous webinar, whether or not you want to give everyone that ability to do a disabling of a backup without some sort of oversight, right, or visibility by a manager. You can run a one-time backup now, and then you could also delete backup data. Again, that role-based access control, we can talk through that, make sure that only authorized folks should be able to do that. And if you want kind of that role-based access, that approval workflow, I should say, to protect against that, you can make sure that that's not done without any oversight. Ashley, I think that's everything I wanted to cover for our backups portion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frank. You covered a lot. Nerdio has a lot of things in place to assist with those backups. So yeah, and I want to know who's currently using this feature, who isn't using it, but based on the demo, feels like they feel empowered to use the feature, or somebody who needs a little bit more help. So go ahead and answer this poll. It's right there for everybody to see. And, we got to get theme music during this time. Like, so we can have some music playing. You guys don't want to hear me sing anything. Okay. Right? We'll give it a little while longer. All right, let's look at the stats of backups. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Lots of people are currently utilizing this feature. That's awesome to hear. Wow. A lot of people feel good after your demo, Frank. It's not something they're currently using, but they feel empowered to start leveraging it. And we do have some people who need some help. They need somebody at Nerdio to help guide them through that. Frank, is that something your team would do, or who should
Yeah.
they reach out to?
Yeah, after every webinar, if
Okay.
you've kind of raised your hand and you said, I need some help, we'll make sure that we reach out to you to make sure that you get the help you need.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys, we are going to actually cover the last feature. So we've already touched on image management. We hit backups. What's the final feature? Okay, the final feature is AVD Host Pool properties. So what is this? What is this? Like I said, I have to do my little marketing spiel for you guys. So host pools are a group of Azure VMs that host AVD that the end users access. Simple, dictionary.com definition. So all of the VMs in that host pool share a set of configuration options, and that includes VM size, base image. I think that's the theme of today, images, image management, like that sort of thing. AD domain, user profile storage location, et cetera, et cetera. So why should you care about this feature? Why should you utilize it? So you guys should care as MSPs about this feature because it plays a significant role in the provisioning, management, and most importantly, the optimization of your virtual desktop services. So these host pools are super, super critical because they define the environment in which your users operate, and they can directly impact performance, cost, which is very important, scalability, and that all ties up in a nice little package of user satisfaction. So that's all I have for that. Frank, did you want to add anything? Was my dictionary.com definition A1? Like
It was 100% spot on, and I'd love to dive right into it. So we're back in the customer layer here in Nerdio. And then to get to this section of Nerdio, you simply have to go to AVD and host pools. And then on the right-hand side, let's see which one I want to go with. Pick your host pool, hit the drop-down, and now it's going to be in this properties menu here. Now there's going to be a good amount of settings here. I'm not going to be able to cover every single one for the sake of time, but there's going to be some I really want to call out that maybe you just weren't aware of. I've had conversations with some partners recently who just weren't aware of some of these things, and I'm like, hey, we gotta talk about some of this because I feel like there's a lot of power kind of under the hood here that we should be bringing to the forefront. So of course, it's going to be your generic property information. Okay, so do we have Active Directory set up? Okay, which domain is this host pool assigned to? Fine, that's all good. We also will have some of this information we filled out when you initially onboarded the customer with Nerdio. So for instance, your AD environment, the domain name, AD username, AD password, that will show up in here as well. Same with the OU that you're going to put your AVD session host into. Okay, that's all usually at the beginning when you first onboard that customer. Next thing you'll have is some AVD specific settings. Okay, so for instance, you can set whether or not you want to go with breadth first or depth first session allocation, right? So you're going to go wide on your session host, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, or you're going to go 5 down with a depth first type approach, right? Five session limits, a session limit of 5, and go 5 deep before you move on to the next host. couple other things, just worth calling out: setting your time zone, maintenance window for your AVD agent updates. That can be handled right through this menu as well. But I want to get to some of the things that I wanted to focus in on, right? So I would say right here is where I want to call out your VM deployment, meaning that as a session host gets deployed, here are some really important customizations that you can do to that machine upon deployment. So again, I don't need to read out, let's say, every single option here, but take a quick look at some of the things that you're going to see here at the top, right? Enable trusted launch, allow non-admin users to shadow sessions. These are really important settings, but they will only apply to newly created or re-imaged hosts in the pools, in that pool, right? So keep that in mind. So if you go and set up some of these settings, you're like, hey, why are they not taking effect? It's because you probably need to re-image your machine for some of these new settings to take effect. But really what I wanted to focus in on here is the scripted actions section of the VM deployment. So there was a question in the chat before, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to just everybody yet, but there was a question asked about how do we handle RMM when it comes to our AVD and our desktop image? And so I talked about, some strategies you can employ for getting the agent on, but then removing it before sysprep. I showed the way that you can handle that. But I would say now, kind of in that phase 3 of when we actually go and deploy that session host into the pool, how do we handle the RMM getting on those session hosts? And then more importantly, I would say for an MSP is how do we make sure that those agents don't stay on there forever, right? And don't cost us a bunch of money with these ghost agents that aren't in use when we reimage our host pool. And so this is how we can handle that. When a VM is created, let's say, we would run a scripted action to, as I showed you before, install RMM. Great. When that first host is added to the pool or a new session host is added, tell Nerdio to go and run this script. And now my RMM is going to be live on that agent. On that session host. Same thing can be said for your endpoint protection if you're using Sentinel-1 or Huntress or something like that. This is when you want to leverage the agent-based installs to be put in. You want to leverage this field right here to do that. Okay, keep it off the image as much as you can help it. Put it in though when that host pool gets deployed into AVD. You can also have the ability to run scripted actions when a VM is started or stopped, but the next step that's super important is how do we keep it clean, right? And this is where when a host VM is removed from the pool or deallocated, you would go and run your uninstall scripts for these agents. And this is how you can kind of manage the life cycle from start to finish to make sure your agents are nice and clean. Your machine groups, let's say, with some RMM vendors aren't getting cluttered with these AVD hosts that are just ghosts and no longer existent. You can really manage that right from here. Okay, I wanted to make sure that comes to the forefront. Next, I want to talk about Azure Capacity Extender. Super, super valuable feature here in Nerdio that you're not going to get, let's say, natively in Azure, to my knowledge, which is, hey, we've had this happen maybe a couple times recently. Azure runs out of capacity of this specific VM type. And so, for instance, hey, there was a question about where you get your latest RMM agent. That's just going to be managed on your script. So you're going to update your scripted actions. If you get a new agent, you can do that. Maybe the RMM vendor that you work with has the ability to get it kind of automatically from a public URL, so you don't have to go and update it in the script every time. But you're going to manage that on your script itself. Hopefully that helps answer that question. Sorry. Okay, so Azure Capacity Extender, back to what I was mentioning here, is you're going to pick your host pool default VM size, right? So maybe for this host pool, we're doing an E2AS v5, 2-core 16 gig machine. However, what if Azure runs out of those particular session hosts or VM types in that region for a period of time, let's say, or a day, whatever? Well, in that case, if you chose to re-image, let's say on a Sunday night, and they were out of the E2AS v5s, well, the problem is you're kind of running into an issue where you're not going to be able to, like, Nerdio can't deploy, right? Because the E2AS v5 is resource constricted in that region. And so what you have to do is, in this case, if you set this up ahead of time, you would have a fallback, like an alternate to go and set up. So maybe you'd be like, all right, well, if the E2s aren't available, maybe I'll go with like a D4, something like that. Or maybe I'll go with an E2AS v4, right? So I'll go back to the previous version of the hardware. That's okay. At least I'm running. I don't want to be dead in the water, right? Or maybe you do an E2S v5, which would be an Intel based machine as opposed to AMD. You do all that and you give yourself a little bit of a buffer just in case that happens to be able to have that alternate VM set up from Nerdio when you reimage your host pool. All right, custom RDP properties, we've spoken about that in a previous webinar, so I'm not going to cover that today. You can set all that up here. Similar kind of concept with your FSLogix based settings for your host pool. You can handle all of that here as well in the properties. Azure Monitor insights you can enable right from here. Again, I'm not going to cover that just today. Last one I do want to cover, though, is your session time limits. So this one's really, really valuable. Again, can kind of, I don't want to say hide on you in here, but this is worth setting up, right, and to be aware of. And so, for instance, if you are using auto-scaling with Azure for AVD, with Nerdio, I should say, for AVD, what you for sure want to make sure is that you set up some sort of user session time limits. Now, you can do it via group policy. If you have an Active Directory domain environment, you can set up your user session time limits, right? So disconnect an idle session after a certain period of time and then log off that session. The reason that's important is because you want to make sure that users get signed out at the end of the day and don't just sit there kind of dormant and idle. And ultimately, if they're not active on that AVD session, they're going to end up just burning cost in Azure because that session host is going to stay on indefinitely, right? Because as we know, users many times, and I'm one of them, I don't like to sign off, right? I'd rather keep my work there. And so I'm not always the best about logging off. And so, well, if you set this up, that will make sure that even if a user doesn't themselves disconnect or log off, you can go ahead and control that. So as I said, you can do it in Active Directory, but you could also do it here through these Nerdio settings in the host pool properties. So if you enable this, again, applying only to newly created or reimaged hosts, you can choose the option to apply to existing hosts. I believe that does require a restart. Yes, it does. So keep that in mind. However, all that being said, here's how I would like to do this. And this is the last thing I have for you today, is I would like to say, all right, and every customer is different, every partner will be different. But in my mind, I'm saying, all right, if they've not been active for 30 minutes, maybe I want to disconnect the session. It just means that they got to go back to the AVD in their AVD agent, right, the remote desktop agent, and click on the icon again and get signed back in. Their work is still there, right? Nothing's been changed. They just need to reconnect, re-authenticate in a way. So that's your disconnect idle sessions. Probably don't want to do active, and probably won't be touching this one too much here as well. But then the next one you want to do is, okay, let's say that idle session has been disconnected after 30 minutes. Well, it doesn't help us to be able to scale in that AVD host though yet until we deal with logging that session off. So then once they become disconnected, how long do we want to wait before we actually log them off, right? And their work is gone on that AVD session host. Probably want to have that conversation with the customer, talk about the benefits of saving cost in Azure is being the ultimate goal here. And so once you've come to that agreement of time, maybe give it an extra hour. So if someone just walks away from their computer in the middle of the day, they have about an hour and a half before their work actually gets, let's say, closed out on them, right, in their AVD session. So you want to overly communicate that to your customer, but this is where you can control that. And once you set this up right, you're going to give yourself a lot more flexibility around being able to scale in those AVD hosts and save a ton more money on your Azure consumption. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody. That covers it for the demo portion of AVD Host Pool properties for me.
Awesome, awesome. All right, guys, let's see how you guys are feeling about AVD Host Pool properties based on the demo you just saw. How are you guys feeling? Do you feel like, I got this? I know what to do, and I'm currently using this feature. You feeling like, I can do this on my own, but I'm not currently using this? Or the last one, I need help. I'm raising my hand. I would like someone at Nerdio to guide me through setting this up. So we'll give it a couple more seconds, and then we will see. But that was great, Frank. Very, very good. Very detailed.
Pleasure.
Learned a lot.
Awesome.
All
Happy
right.
to, guys. Hope it was a help.
All right. Woo. Yay. So this is really nice. A lot of people are currently happy with how they're utilizing this, and they feel really, really good. Second, they a decent amount of people as well feel like they can do this on their own, but they're not currently utilizing this. And then we have a few hand raisers. They would like somebody at Nerdio to help guide them. So reach out to Frank's team, reach out to the customer success team, and they can help you. All right, aside from the wonderful, wonderful customer success team here at Nerdio, we have a couple of additional resources that I'd like to show for you guys. One of the major ones is our training camps. If you have not attended one of our training camps, you are missing out. It is 2 jam-packed days. The first day is a sales day, second day is a technical day, and they go through just about everything you would need to know to get started with AVD, but also to get started with Nerdio. And to top it all off, it is completely covered by Nerdio. Your room and board and food. All you have to do is pay for yourself to get down there. So that, or get up there, wherever, to get to the location. That's what you would need to do. Yeah, it's a great value, great investment, 10 out of 10. I've been to a few now, and even though I've been to a few, I feel like I'm learning something new every single time. So awesome, awesome. Okay, and I know we've been asking a lot of polls, but we want to know more about you. We want to know what you guys like. So what feature are you most excited to take advantage of based on the ones that we have highlighted today? So let's go ahead and get some submissions for that. I really want to know. My guess, I'm gonna say, what's your guess? I think AVD.
I'm going image management.
You're going image management. I'm going AVD. That's what I'm doing. All right, we'll give it a couple more seconds. Let's see who wins. Let's see who
We're
wins.
gonna have to keep a tally of this, Ashley. See who wins in their guess on what the people say.
I think you got me beat thus far. So let's see. I think this is my time to even the stakes. Oh man, image management. See, no, it's like 3-1 now.
Undefeated.
I don't know you guys at all. I know. I feel like I don't know you guys at all, man. So we have a couple of minutes left. We'll answer some of the questions that we haven't been able to get to via the chat out loud now. It looks like Frank has cleared out a ton of these. Question. I saw where you regenerated the host with a newly set image, but I'm wondering if there is a way to automate schedule to power on and then power off and set as image process.
So the question is, just to make sure I'm clear, how do we do all, like, each phase of that process in an automated fashion?
Yeah, automated or scheduled fashion.
Yeah, so the cool thing is, and I don't know if you saw it in the demo, is every single button, every phase of that gives you the ability to use a schedule, right? So there'll be a toggle for a schedule or a button for a schedule for every single one of those 3 phases there. Yep.
Awesome. Are image automation tools like Azure Image Templates, which uses Packer on the horizon for Nerdio? I would have to ask PM. I'll have to ask PM, and I'll pass that information along to Frank's team, and they will get back with you.
Good question.
All righty, let's ask another one. What is the best method for setting up a desktop image when it is necessary to do a domain join in order to install software? Should you domain join it while setting up the image and then disjoin it when creating the image, and then domain join when setting up the host in the host pool?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've gotten asked that before too. And again, it's like, I hate to always say it kind of depends on the environment, but I would just say it's not a bad thing, let's say, to domain join your image. Some people have strong opinions on whether or not you should or shouldn't, but I would say if you've got software that needs to deploy via GPO or something like that, I would say it really just is going to depend on what you've got in that GPO and how that gets handled. So for instance, you probably in all likelihood could put it on your desktop image, domain join that desktop image, but just be aware that there is something to be, a caveat to that, is if you've got software that is agent-based that also would deploy just automatically via GPO when it's domain joined, you've got to be careful about that, right? Because you don't want that to get on your image and then try and sysprep and then break, right? So just be super, super cognizant of what's going to deploy as part of that GPO or domain join process. And if nothing is going to break sysprep, then by all means, I would say go ahead and put it on domain join that image.
Awesome, awesome. We are, unfortunately, guys, at the top of the hour. So I promise the questions that we did not get to, we will follow up with you guys later and answer those questions for you. And once again, I would like to thank you guys so much for attending the Beyond the Basics webinars with us. Like, as long as you guys like these, we'll keep doing them. I mean, it's great to see that these are helping you. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me and Frank.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.